In the beginning, darkness and storm shrouded the earth. Below, other powerful forces were at work, forming and shaping. Slowly, the face of the planet emerged. Millions of years ago, giant dinosaurs roamed these primordial forests. A vast inland sea covered portions of the land, and over the millenniums, a great reef was formed, created by plants and animals. Today, that sea is gone. Only this flat, arid plain remains with its ancient shoreline still visible. It contains the fossilized remains of past sea life. But the enormous reef, the best preserved that our world has ever known, remains. One exposed portion includes the Guadalupe Mountains National Park, with its towering peaks and unique ecological system. And deep within the massive reef lies the unrivaled Carlsbad Caverns. Guadalupe Mountains and Carlsbad Caverns National Parks are located in West Texas and southeastern New Mexico. The visitor's introduction to both begins with the rugged beauty of the Chihuahuan Desert. Walnut Canyon is the entrance to Carlsbad Caverns National Park, and the excellent park highway spirals upward to the dramatic visitor center atop the ancient Capitan Reef. Today's modern visitor center replaced an earlier one that was just as busy way back in the 1930s. Present-day visitors to the caverns total nearly 1 million a year. Each leaves refreshed by the beauty and scope of what they have beheld. The National Park Service offers a variety of information here on all the features of the caverns, as well as those of the mountains and deserts. There are many exhibits within the Visitor Center Museum. They include one on the interesting history of mining guano, once an important natural fertilizer. This old mine car was part of an operation that removed over 100,000 tons of bat droppings from the cave in the early 1900s. Later, this mine shaft was developed for removing guano and lowering visitors into the cavern. Some visitors elect to enter the caverns by elevator, while others enter by the natural entrance, a great opening in the earth that leads downward along a zigzag path into the main corridor underground. The year-round temperature is 56 degrees, so you may wish to wear a sweater or jacket. The entire trail is surfaced and electrically lighted. All tours are under the direction of National Park Service rangers. Your trip into the mysterious underground world begins at the amphitheater. Nearby is the Bat Cave, a vast, pitch-black chamber that is the summer home of countless thousands of Mexican free-tailed bats. The earliest visitors entered the caverns in a large bucket that was lowered 170 feet down a mine shaft. Those were exciting times, for a trip into the caverns then was a real adventure. This stairway was made of sacks of guano laid over difficult portions of the trail. Descending into the caverns brings us to our first named feature, known as the Devil's Spring. Every formation here is natural, just as nature made it. As the trail continues downward, we see a very appropriately named formation, the Whale's Mouth. The stone teeth are the first example of draperies seen by the visitor. At the Devil's Den, you have now entered the Great Capitan Reef. The baby hippo is a delight, especially to children. At this point, the ceiling is 200 feet above you, the height of a 20-story building. Along the trails, friendly Park Service rangers will be happy to answer your questions. Iceberg Rock is located at the 650-foot level. Its weight is estimated at over 200,000 tons, with no more than 1/8 of it visible from any location. 30 minutes are required for a visitor to walk around it. This giant rock collapsed as supporting material dissolved away during the early development of the caverns. Green Lake Room is the first of 4 spectacular rooms. It is named after a pool of emerald water very near the trail. This point is the deepest place on your tour at 829 feet below the visitor center. The frozen waterfall looks just like a lacy cascade spilling down from a higher chamber caught in an icy spell of winter. But it's a waterfall of stone, and it won't change with the coming of spring. Nearly hidden in a nearby nook is another animal friend, the bashful baby elephant. The King's Highway winds its way through the King's Palace, one of Carlsbad Caverns' most highly decorated chambers. It is the second of 4 great chambers in the extraordinary scenic section. The shape of cave decoration depends on how fast water enters a cave. Each drop leaves behind a minute deposit. A thin, hollow tube stretches very slowly toward the floor. In this manner, a stalactite forms. Its vaulted ceiling is garlanded with countless stalactites. The King's Palace is thought by many to be the most beautiful room in the caverns. It is truly a royal hall of breathtaking size and splendor. Much of this room is silvery white, with shades of pale brown and gray. It is the most distinctively colored room that the visitor will see. The King's Bell Cord is an incredibly thin, delicate shaft of stone formed over countless thousands of years. These formations are called soda straw stalactites, and they grow from the ceiling where water containing dissolved limestone seeps very slowly downward. In another section of the King's Palace is the romantically named Eternal Kiss, a stalactite and stalagmite that almost touch. Many visitors are confused by the similarities between the 2 most common cave formations. A simple rule to help you remember is that a stalactite with a C grows down from the ceiling. A stalagmite with a G grows up from the ground. The keyhole is the passageway between the King's Palace and the Queen's Chambers, another magnificent room. The Queen's Orchestra is formed by a very unusual grouping of stalagmites that produce the effect of an unearthly orchestra in the depths of the earth. Twisted spaghetti-like helictites form when water seeps very slowly. Water is pulled to an opening in the center of each formation by capillary attraction to the tip where wedge-shaped crystals form. For this reason, they may grow in any direction. Near the back of the chamber, hanging from the ceiling high overhead, is one of the most spectacular formations in the caverns. Thin draperies of stone hanging in folds nearly 50 feet long adorn the roof and walls. Water seeping from a sloping ceiling forms draperies that are often translucent enough to show bands of colors where trace minerals have been deposited. The visitor leaves the Queen's chambers through a tunnel cut through solid rock. The Papoose Room is the last of the 4 magnificent chambers in the scenic section. The trail follows a sloping ramp along one wall, affording an amazing panorama of intricate and detailed stonework. These splendid draperies, formed by mineral-laden water trickling down the sloping wall, have been colored by trace minerals such as iron oxide. The Papoose Room received its name because formations are somewhat smaller than those in the larger rooms. One startling stalagmite has an ancient bat preserved in stone, its body seemingly preserved in time by the slow accumulation of limestone-laden water that eventually completely covered it with stone. This is another area where some formations are still wet and therefore still in the process of growing. Here, we're directly under the immense iceberg rock that we passed earlier. When that huge mass fell, it dislodged these broken formations from the ceiling of this room. Early explorers to the caverns couldn't resist the temptation to record their names for history by using their torches. One area along the trail is very appropriately named. This is the Boneyard, a dramatic example of solution pockets where cave development stopped before cavern chambers were made. There is one room in the caverns where man's handiwork is quite apparent, and it's sure to be one of the highlights of your tour. One great high-vaulted chamber whose floor is 750 feet beneath the surface is called the lunchroom. Here, the visitor may stop for food, refreshments, photo supplies, or to mail a postcard. When your tour resumes, you will find yourself strolling through the grape arbor with formations shaped very much like bunches of grapes. At one time, the caverns were completely underwater. These lily pads were created during a period when there was water in this now dry pool. When it drained away, these unique high water marks were left. When your tour enters the big room of Carlsbad Caverns, you'll be walking into an underground chamber that's larger than any cave you have ever imagined. The farthest point that you can see is 500 feet away, and the room is over a quarter of a mile in length. Hanging overhead is the Sword of Damocles, a great drapery type of stalactite flowing from the lofty ceiling of the caverns far above. Decorative formations in a cave are technically known as speleothems. As previously mentioned, stalactites occur from dripping water from the ceiling. When the water flow is fast enough, some drops fall to the floor, and the limestone deposited there grows up, forming a stalagmite. The big room is filled with formations. Many are small, but some, like these massive domes in the Hall of Giants, are truly enormous, one reaching a height of 60 feet. In reality, they are nothing more than giant stalagmites that have grown to this size because the water splashes over a larger area. Most stalagmites are rounded on top like these and have a thicker diameter than stalactites. The proverbial lion's tail hangs from the ceiling for all to see. In the caverns, you may see whatever you wish in the wild variety of formations, limited only by your imagination. These stone draperies formed when seeping water followed the same track down a wall, building first a ridge, then a ribbon, and eventually a drapery. Our tour continues as we come to Fairyland in the Temple of the Sun. The stalactites on the ceiling here are especially profuse. The section known as Fairyland in the foreground looks very much like a miniature city with its myriads of tiny towers and minarets spread out on all sides. Cave popcorn is the name given to the coating on these and other formations found throughout the caverns. Rangers will explain how these formations were formed over a period of thousands of years. The Temple of the Sun, a feature on which the sun has never shone, is certainly one of Carlsbad's more spectacular formations. It is so named because of the variety of shades of yellow found on it. The breast of Venus, or the coolie's hat, is a remarkably symmetrical formation where the dissolved limestone has crystallized over rubble. The totem pole, an incredibly slender tower of stone bric-a-brac nearly 40 feet tall. It always invokes surprise from the visitors. Often a stalagmite will grow directly beneath a stalactite if they are both supplied by a single water source. When they grow enough to connect, they become a column. Along this trail in the big room, the ceiling far overhead is 255 feet, enough room for a 25-story building. During the countless millennia needed for the fashioning of the formations, the big room remained in complete darkness. No light broke through this underground night. The only sound was the sound of the cavern's creation, the steady dripping of water. Drops of water disturb the glassy smoothness of Mirror Lake. This sign is most unusual as it can only be read by reflection. Even a slight change in the crystal clear water of cavern pools can mean that significant changes are occurring in the cavern's delicate environment. The bottomless pit actually does have a bottom at about 138 feet below the trail. The chandelier was formed by a large group of stalactites. Carlsbad Caverns even has a caveman. He sits at one side of the big room, a fringed shawl over his hunched shoulders and a blanket across his lap. Not far away is the Christmas tree, looking very much like a sturdy hemlock, its limbs heavily laden with new fallen snow. This giant stalagmite has been created by the trickling of rainwater over hundreds of centuries, picking up dissolved limestone in solution. A ranger has a good chance to show us another good example of translucence in this stubby stalagmite, aptly named the Blushing Bride. Water slowly seeping from the surface has formed a vast array of formations here at Carlsbad. The coloring of these formations is caused by additional chemicals carried in the rainwater. You will see a vast variety of colors, ranging from shades of red, orange, and yellow to brown, black, and white. Crystal Spring Dome is the largest known living and growing formation in the entire caverns. So much water is falling on the dome, in fact, that it's created a pool in the small depression under it. Its surface is constantly wet and dripping. If rainfall on the surface were to increase substantially, water flow into the caverns would likely increase, and formations that are presently dry might become active again, just as this one is today. Scarcely a visitor tours Carlsbad without exclaiming in admiration at the sight of the magnificent Rock of Ages. In fact, that name could well apply to all the large domes of Carlsbad. Its handsome coloring features shades of red, yellow, and brown. Further along the climbing trail is the frozen Niagara, flowing all the way from the ceiling to the floor like a giant waterfall. The frozen Niagara is also abundant in mineral-enriched limestone that has created a beautiful variety of shades and colors. At its base is a small pool of sparkling clear water. In addition to the large formations, there are many smaller ones, some hidden in niches or corners that are very impressive in the amount of exquisite detail they include. The painted grotto is a perfect example. Its multitude of tiny stalactites offer a variety of colors. The Doll's Theater is among everyone's favorite. It's a charming and busy stage setting in miniature, crammed with tiny and fragile formations. This corridor is known as the Jim White Tunnel. It is named in honor of the original modern explorer of the cave. He was a cowboy who was one of the early miners of bat guano, and he stayed on to explore deeper into the vast caverns. These remarkable films show Jim White in the early 1920s, exploring with the aid of magnesium flares for light. word of the incredible cavern spread, and finally in 1923, Carlsbad Cave was set aside as part of the national park system. It was redesignated a national park in 1930. The celery stalk is an interesting stalactite hanging from a high ceiling. Some visitors see a dancing figure in the Chinese theater. Its spired high hat is near the center of the natural stage. Our Carlsbad tour has covered the world's most magnificent caverns. Both spectacular size and endless array of formations are here in breathtaking beauty and variety. All tours end with a ride to the surface in high-speed elevators. But there is still one dramatic event here at Carlsbad that must not be missed. The caverns are a summer home to about 500,000 Mexican free-tailed bats. And although you probably won't see any underground, they put on an incredible show above ground. A rare opportunity is provided by the Park Service to watch this spectacle at the amphitheater at the cave mouth. Each summer evening, the bats come spiraling up out of the natural entrance in a great cloud that lasts from 30 minutes to 2.5 hours. They swarm down into the river valleys below to forage for food. They cover a radius of about 50 miles or more, consuming literally tons of insects each night. Just before dawn, they return to the caverns to sleep, hanging upside down from the ceilings of a series of rooms off the tour route. In the fall, they migrate south to a warmer climate in Mexico. This engrossing spectacle, together with the underground wonders, make Carlsbad Caverns one of nature's grandest gifts to all of mankind. New Cave is located 9 miles southwest of Carlsbad Caverns in Slaughter Canyon. It is one of the largest caves within the park and is reached via a steep half-mile trail. The Guadalupe Mountains are laced with over 200 caves. Within the boundaries of Carlsbad Caverns National Park, over 70 have been discovered. Some are small, but many are immense. And one of the most interesting is New Cave. The canyon was named for Charles Slaughter, who in the late 1800s was the second settler of the area. The cave was originally called Slaughter Canyon Cave. These massive mountains were an underwater reef ringing an inland sea 250 million years ago. Over eons of time, the cave was formed in this reef. The Park Service has opened it to give the visitor an experience second only to true spelunking in a wild cave. It always helps to know just where you are. There are many species of wildlife and insects within the area, such as these fleet-footed mule deer. New Cave is open to the public on a regular basis. Tours are by reservation only and are guided by Park Service personnel. All the other caves in the park are known as wild caves, with no development and none planned. New Cave has a total length of 1 3/4 miles, and its entrance is 475 feet above the canyon floor. There are no electric lights, and the exciting tours are conducted by lantern and flashlights. A long corridor slopes downward from the entrance. Like Carlsbad, New Cave has developed very slowly in the massive Capitan limestone reef and is characterized by large rooms with arched ceilings and a spectacular amount of speleothem decorations. There is evidence of prehistoric peoples here, including pictographs, pottery shards, stone blades, and bone fragments. Today, bats are seldom found in the cave, but long ago, a now extinct species deposited a vast amount of bat guano. Mining of the guano began in 1943 and continued intermittently till 1958. At one time, a tractor was used during the mining. The marks of its treads have been preserved on the floor of the cave. Other artifacts of modern man were left behind, too. Many visitors are startled by the vast amounts of guano. This corridor has been cut through such a deposit, and visible within it are the bones of countless bats that have been dated at over 17,000 years of age. The Chinese wall is a thin, scalloped wall from 4 to 12 inches high that formed around the edge of a pool. It covers an area of 1,000 square feet and has a thickness of about 3/4 of an inch. Its name was derived from the Great Wall of China. New Cave is adorned with a marvelous amount of outstanding formations. Spectacular flowstones such as these have been created when mineral-laden water has seeped down a wall, depositing limestone and calcite crystallized from water solutions. The largest and most dramatic formation in the cave is this enormous stalagmite. This giant, named the Monarch, is over 60 feet tall. The Klansman may be the most grotesque formation in the cave, but it is also one of the most beautiful. It bears such a name because it resembles a long-forgotten hooded rider. It has amazing detail. The visible portion of the face appears to have teeth and a beard. Stalagmites such as this have been created over millions of years. This very large formation is known as the Christmas tree, and it towers 35 feet high with a diameter of 14 feet. There are countless varieties of formations in the cave. There are a number of active wet formations here, and most visitors find them fascinating. No detailed studies have been made of the climate of the cave, but the average cave temperature is 62 degrees. Leaving New Cave is as exciting as entering, climbing ever upward toward the mysterious opening back to the outside world. Our tour is now finished. New Cave is one of 73 known caves in Carlsbad Caverns National Park. It and Carlsbad are the only ones open to the public. New Cave is large, beautiful, wild, and undeveloped. Carlsbad Caverns is enormous and one of the world's most outstanding developed caverns. Yet what other remarkable wonders must exist unseen deep within this mighty reef, still waiting man's discovery? Southwest of Carlsbad Caverns, across the Texas border, is Guadalupe Mountains National Park. The seemingly endless flat plains of western Texas are abruptly broken by giant rocky cliffs. This is the mighty face of the towering Guadalupe Mountains, the very same giant reef in which Carlsbad Caverns formed. In the Pine Springs area are the interesting ruins of the Butterfield Overland Mail Pinery Station, established in 1858. These ruins recall a colorful past when riders and stagecoaches stopped here en route east as far as St. Louis or west as far as San Francisco. The area around Pine Springs is rich in cultural resources. There is abundant evidence of ancient Indian occupation, and springs along the mountains provided water for early ranchers who moved into that area after the Civil War. The Guadalupes contain a plentiful amount of insect and reptilian life. There's a small campground here. The Guadalupes tower above historic Frijoles Spring. A short distance up the trail lies lovely, cool Smith Spring. Wildlife can usually be seen along the trail. The Guadalupe Mountains National Park contains 4 of the highest peaks in Texas, all over 8,500 feet in elevation. In the foreground is the top of El Capitan, as seen from the Guadalupe Peak, the highest, with its summit reaching 8,749 feet. To the east, broken lines of rolling, eroded hill country stretch to the horizon. Hunter Peak, which towers above the Pine Springs campground, is the 6th highest named peak in the park. Visitors who climb these high mountains are rewarded with spectacular views of the surrounding desert. From Hunter Peak, deep Pine Canyon plunges far below, and Guadalupe Peak towers overhead. Pine Canyon provides access to a number of important features of the park. A striking natural phenomenon is the hiker's staircase. Sharply stratified sedimentary rock has produced individual rock steps that look very similar to any ancient stairway from Greek or Roman times. This sharp cut in the stratified canyon walls is known as Devil's Hallway. Several trails into the high country provide access to an area known as the Bowl. Here, in a sheltered depression, 2,500 feet above the surrounding desert, visitors are surprised and delighted to find this dense coniferous forest, populated by a wide variety of birds, animals, and reptiles. These woodlands are believed to be a relic of a bygone era when dense forest covered much of West Texas. The Dog Canyon area of the Guadalupe Mountains National Park is in a secluded canyon on the north side of the park at an elevation of 6,300 feet. Here, visitors will find high cliffs, peaceful canyons, hiking trails, and interesting plant and animal life. This may include this frisky tarantula. Dog Canyon has always been a remote region, but a public access road enables the visitor to reach a campground with water and restrooms. The canyon drains much of the area north of Lost Peak. Dog Canyon Spring is an important water source for deer and other wildlife. A hike into McKittrick Canyon begins at this visitor center facility. There is much to see and discover here year-round, but one of the most popular times of the year is late fall, when the canyon is filled with the colorful foliage of maple, walnut, ash, oak, and other hardwood trees. Prehistoric people lived here as long as 1,200 years ago. Pictographs on cave walls and scattered stone-chipped tools remain as evidence of their presence. McKittrick Canyon is full of wildlife with 58 known species of mammals and 243 species of birds identified. This old ranch cabin was built in 1928 and is one of several historical buildings in the park. The park's extensive trail system provides excellent opportunities for observing a wide variety of plant life and rock formations. Legends of lost gold and buried treasure are probably based more on folklore than on fact. McKittrick Canyon has a perennial spring-fed stream which adds to its beauty and diversity. Although closed to fishing, fish can be seen swimming through quiet pools. Towering on each side are the exposed Capitan Reef limestone, which was uncovered and dissolved by the erosion of the canyon. This cabin, built almost entirely of limestone, was constructed by Wallace Pratt in 1930. Pratt described McKittrick Canyon as the most beautiful spot in Texas. He donated 5,600 acres to the park. The water and vegetation have brought not only deer, but a menagerie of other wildlife. These towering peaks and the massive reef from which they were formed have been shrouded in storm, legend, and mystery since their creation so long ago. Today, man has taken steps to continue to preserve these great mountains and the glorious caverns that lie within, unimpaired, for the enjoyment of future generations.